Chapter 24, 977 Mulberry Road, Grassley, Louisiana, June 26, 1967. "Well, I just got the word," said Meinkewitz as he trudged up the stairs. "About what?" asked Patch, standing with a cup of coffee. "Did you find a contact and a drop-off?" "The answer is yes, Patch, but that's not it. Garrison's head investigator, gone." "Gurevich? Turn on the TV." TV showed a black and white film by one of the stations.
See Garrison about re-evaluating the DA's assassination probe, but at first he was told he could not go in.
You tell me I can't come in my office? Right.
He was allowed to go in moments later, but Gurevich was added this about Garrison's investigation.
And I think the investigation has to be stopped. I would have preferred it to be stopped by his now processing the matter. And if I can't get it done that way, how else are you going to do it? The evidence is there.
Do you think Mr. Garrison should be allowed to continue to operate his office?
In this manner? The manner in which he conducted this alleged assassination probe? No, I don't.
You think he should be taken out of that office?
I don't know about being taken out now. I just say that it was done unethically, with no regard to the rights and privileges of people.
"Well, Ray, who got to him?" Meinkewitz stroked his chin. "Bobby." "What?" "He met Bobby on June 8th. He said there was no plot against his brother. Gurevich lifted Garrison's master file." "Not good," said Patch. "What about the drop?" "You and I are going to New Orleans," said Meinkewitz. "Is that smart? With Finney in Vietnam, you and I doing the drop is the only secure way. Unless somebody recognizes us." St. Louis Cathedral, Jackson Square, New Orleans, Louisiana. "About time you went to church, Ray," said Patch in his sunglasses as the horse-drawn carriage approached the spires, pointing to the blue sky. "We'd better hope," said Meinkewitz in a brown touring cap, "that nobody who is somebody spots us." Patch pressed his lips as he thought about traveling through here 3 years ago with Shari. She loved the gardenia. "What was that, Patch?" asked Meinkewitz, grabbing the white tube. "Gardenia. We walked through the square. I put a flower in her hair. Patch, I talked to Mendacia. He's working on the bubble displacement problem, and he has other physicists concentrating on nudging the bubble." The driver slowed the coach. "And we don't even know who we're meeting. Just keep your weapon on the ready. Denali's in a precarious position, Patch, being watched by the CIA. We're on our own down here. My password is a quote from Mark Twain." Meinkewitz tipped the coachman, and the two men walked briskly toward the elongated center doors. Patch meticulously scanned the dark wood pews as they stepped inside. Balconies were positioned atop the columns. Families sat on the balcony edge, and several people prayed on their knees in the front ground-level pews. Meinkewitz had his hand on the butt of his gun as they click-clacked along the black and white diamond tiles. "These people are praying, Ray." Well, maybe we should join them." Meinkewitz moved into one of the side pews on the right. Patch slid across the glossy surface. He stared at the image of Christ teaching high above. How does God fit into the realm of time and space? Was changing time a violation of God's creation? He was unsure that even Menkiewitz's colleagues working on the dimensional bubble. "God knows what he's doing, no matter what we do, Patch." "Gentlemen," said a hooded woman behind him. Both Patch and Meinkewitz lifted their guns and pointed at her face, but she didn't flinch. "Angel of God, my guardian dear, to whom his love commits me here, ever this day be at my side to light and guard and rule and guide. Amen." "I'm sorry, sister." "Polaris, you shouldn't be so jittery." "New Orleans food is as delicious," said Meinkewitz with half the Twain quote, "as the less criminal forms of sin. Now that we have that out of the way, I believe you have something for me." "Yes, sister," said Meinkewitz as he passed the tube under the pew. She bent over and then stood. "Thank you, and both of you, put away those god-awful weapons. Good day," she said as she shuffled back into the aisle. She exited via a side door, and Patch looked at Meinkewitz. "When in doubt, go to church," said Meinkewitz. "Let's get back to Grassley. Hold on. Psalm 31, verse 9, 14, and 15. Be merciful to me, Lord, for I am in distress. My eyes grow weak with sorrow, my soul and body with grief. But I trust in you, Lord, and I say, you are my God. My times are in your hands. Amen, said Patch as they stood. As he stepped aside into the aisle, he saw 3 men in suits by the arborvitae. Patch grabbed Meínkewitz's arm and yanked him down the aisle to where the sister had gone out the side door. Patch pulled on the door and then he pounded. Up front, another man in a suit stepped in from outside. "Ah, this could get ugly," said Meinkewitz, removing his gun again. The door opened abruptly. "In here," said an older sister. Patch followed Meinkewitz into a darkened hallway. The sister motioned them up the stairs into an adjacent building. Commotion started near the door below. "Up to the roof," said the sister, lagging behind. Patch pushed open the steel door and Meinkewitz followed him onto the gravel roof, and the bright sunshine covered the skylights and the spire of the cathedral. "What now?" yelled Patch as the sister secured the stairway door. "You need to jump." "Sister, while I admire your faith," said Meinkewitz, "I'm not jumping off this building." A series of pings punctuated the door as the sister waddled to an incline near a brick wall. They ran forward. An open area not visible to the door was wedged next to the brick wall. Over the edge, the jump to the open ramp was only a few feet below. Patch leaped first, and then he and Meinkewitz helped the sister down the ramp. She steered them to a doorway ahead. Patch heard the pursuers running on the roof as he gently closed the door. Dressed in habits and robes, Meinkewitz and Patch followed another sister from a garden and onto the sidewalk. They had been assured that the tube would be delivered to a safe location. Patch knew it would get to Garrison. Behind on the sidewalk, 5 men in suits got into a white Ford Fairlane. The tires screeched and the cars zoomed by them back into the city. "Sister, you've increased my faith 1,000-fold," said Meinkewitz. "Godspeed, Polaris." "Being chased by thugs has a redeeming value," said Patch. "I wouldn't go that far." They were guided back to Canal Street, where they had parked the station wagon. Patch offered to drive the sister back to the cathedral, but she declined the offer. Patch behind the wheel, he and Meinkewitz headed north toward the freeway in Grassley. Chapter 25. Vietnam Combat Deaths, July 1967, 458. 977 Mulberry Road, Grassley, Louisiana, July 15, 1967. We have about 2 hours before Garrison's rebuttal, Patch. We haven't seen any evidence that everything I told you, Ray, is having an impact on the investigation. I don't think they have everything I said. But you're sure the tube was dropped off? "Yes," said Meinkewitz from the centipede room. "Patch, come here. Look, Mendacia had a conversation with Dr. Moreau in France. Moreau has suggested that we direct a bubble and propel it with the foam itself, and bump the elongated bubble back through time to Apex Junction." "How do we do that?" "We'll have to do that outside the U.S. in a university setting. Something on our list of things to do. Where do you want to start with me, Ray? Miami, JM Wave?" "When I got you out of Miami," Meinkewitz came out to the conference room and twisted the chrome dial for the recorder, "you ended up at the hotel thanks to Roselli." "That's true, but Sherry saw some things in the safe house where the exiles kept her in Dallas. She saw General Walker enter the house at one time, and Oswald, and Lawrence Howard, a wild man anti-Castro. Somebody was impersonating Oswald all over Texas. Sherry had a Cuban who helped her and fed her information, Rico. Rico said Mrs. Payne overheard her neighbor talking about getting her brother a job at the book place, but she lied. The neighbor never said this. Rico heard them say Payne was a liar. Payne called the book place herself to get Oswald an interview." "There you go. She must be working for the agency." "Well, there's a whole backstory on Payne," said Patch. "Really?" "I may be recapping some of this, I don't know. Michael Payne's stepfather invented the Bell helicopter. Payne's father is a collateral intelligence contact who worked for the OSS. Her sister is a psychologist for, yes, the CIA. And Michael Payne is an asset. Payne is supposedly a Quaker. Her family is linked to the Forbes family, who are friends with Allen Dulles. Interesting stuff. Payne helped Marina move out of New Orleans in a light brown 1955 Chevy station wagon to Dallas, separating Oswald and Marina. Payne had just returned from a whirlwind trip around the Northeast. She was at Noshawn Island, near Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. The Forbes that are linked to Dulles are there. Vermont next, and then she stopped at a college around Philadelphia, and she saw her sister in D.C. She was there when King gave the I Have a Dream speech. What happened after D.C.? She headed back to Philadelphia for Labor Day, and then she checked in with her mother in Columbus, Ohio, as well as her college at Antioch in Ohio. She went to Indiana. When the 6th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham was born, Payne showed up. Said she donated some money. Voila! She shows up at Marina's doorstep in New Orleans. Sounds like a coordinated plan. I cut to the chase, Patch. I think operationally she met with intelligence people in Massachusetts, D.C., and maybe at her other stops. Right. And Oswald was on his own for the most part, but steered into the Texas School Book Depository, which ends up being a slow turn into an area ideal for triangular shooting. And the mayor of Dallas, Earl Cabell, brother of General Cabell, who Kennedy fired from the CIA, changes the route of the motorcade the night before the assassination so the motorcade will creep by the Texas School Book Depository. Back to me. I was taken to a hotel in Miami. I met Tony Verona. I knew him briefly when they had me in Guatemala in 1961. Meinkewitz stroked his chin. I frankly didn't understand how powerful Roselli was to get you out of Miami. He never forgot we got Sanchez, Sturgis, Harvey, some kind of big meeting, Morales. Because of Roselli, I had the in just being around these guys. Trust. Roselli arrived and he said he knew I could keep my mouth shut. He said loyalty is paramount and betrayal is unforgivable. Well, ain't that the truth? Around this time, Sherry is still in the safe house. A Cuban named Felipe said to the other guys that Oswald was now at North Beckley Rooming House in Dallas as of Monday night. Lawrence Howard came in with that lunatic Skip from Tampa. They were talking about silencers and a 30-06 from L.A., modified by Jerry Hemming. They were aware that Marina was with Mrs. Payne and that Oswald had been hired by the Texas School Book Depository. How did they know? I don't know. J. Walton Moore, a link to the CIA, placed a call to George de Morenstadt, a CIA agent. His job initially was to get Ruth Payne in charge of the Oswalds. In September, de Morenstadt requested all information on Oswald go to the 502nd Military Intelligence. De Morenstadt was in Guatemala before the men left for the Bay of Pigs. That's all pertinent information, Patch. I ended up at Marcello's Churchill Farms in the lodge. RD and somebody named Nico watched me. I remember a movie produced by Johnny Roselli in the 40s, He Walked by Night. In that movie, the killer on the run had his rifle stored in a blanket, just as they said Oswald did, which was part of the frame. Who else was there? Ferry, at a nightclub with RD, he whispered to me, Pat, your girl is in a safe house and should be released this weekend. Are we in November 1963, Patch? Beginning of November, Kennedy's trip to Chicago was canceled, probably because of Thomas Arthur Valley. We were there. A high-up intelligence guy named Preslin, Mr. Daniel Preslin, came to Dallas to see what was happening. Sherry learned that Preslin was Bill Harvey. Sometime that month, Shaw drove up in the Cadillac. DeValley was there along with Ferry and Marcello. I was too far away to hear what they were saying. Around this time, they brought Sherry to the Cabana Motor Hotel. She met an officer named Bledsoe. Bledsoe said Oswald got into a new Mercury at the Lincoln Mercury dealership downtown. He drove like a maniac with Beauregard, the salesman. Talked about going back to Russia and buying a car. Set up. Right. And Bledsoe said he had one of those backyard forged photos of Oswald. Sherry saw it by accident. Marcello was on trial at that point, and Ferry was doing legal work for him. But this is what I heard, and it's huge. Tommy Beckham was going to meet in Ray's office and deliver plans, maps, and photos that Ferry had to Lawrence Howard. Tommy would stay at the Executive Inn in Dallas. Where's Beckham now? I don't know. I remember we watched President Kennedy at Arlington National Cemetery on Veterans Day, his last. And Sherry told me that a week or 10 days before Dallas, the FBI sent out a teletype warning of an attempt on the president's life. I saw Kennedy days before the assassination in Tampa, shook his hand as the motorcade slowed. Really? He asked me how I was and spoke about the weather. I told him he should use his bubble top. Then he looked directly at me and said, if you're going to run for president, then you have to be out with the people. Just stay in Tampa? No. I was off to Dallas because I had this address of the safe house. And then I was going to try and stop the president's motorcade before he reached Dealey Plaza. I hitched and waited in an ER for a ride. This drugged-up woman told me Kennedy would be killed on Friday. Now how the hell would she know that? Something about Italians. I think they were Italians. She said they were going from Florida to Dallas. When I ate breakfast in Dallas the next day before the assassination, the newspaper said a storm of political controversy swirls around Kennedy on the visit. The route for the motorcade was published before Mayor Cabell changed it. All the points are there, Patch. All the support posts for the plot. Now we come to specifics, Ray. Go ahead. This, more than anything I learned, stuck with me. Patch reached in his pocket and pulled out 2 folded pieces of paper. Lee Oswald was inserted into a plot to kill President John F. Kennedy. Oswald was in constant contact with ONI, the FBI, and the CIA. A group from Army Intelligence and Defense Intelligence tracked Oswald. I have a copy of what's on the reel-to-reel. Meinkewitz moved the microphone closer to Patch. Okay? Patch leaned forward. This tape was removed from a footlocker in Dallas. Play the tape, Patch.
Classified Plan of Executive Action Pathfinder. 1. Kennedy Address to American University, June 10, 1963. A relinquishing of global power, direct threat to the United States national security. 2. Private letters to Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962. Secret dealings with primary U.S. adversary, positioning the United States in a weakened position. 3. Kennedy's Civil Rights Speech, June 11, 1963, tilting the status quo for the Negro race and creating a groundswell for violence and jeopardizing national security. 4. National Guard troops sent to Alabama by Kennedy to allow Negro students to matriculate, June 11, 1963. 5. Plan to withdraw United States troops from Vietnam. The May 1963 SecDef conference in Honolulu to develop withdrawal plan from Vietnam, placing the United States in a vulnerable national security position as communism expands on the Asian continent. 6. Breaking up of the Central Intelligence Agency after the Bay of Pigs. Direct diminishing of the power of the Central Intelligence Agency to protect the United States of America. 7. Executive Order 11110, concerning silver certificates and abolishing the Federal Reserve, placing the United States financial system at risk by destroying the protection of the people of the United States with the private interests of banks and the U.S. government against national security. 8. Repeal of the oil depletion allowance, straitjacking the oil lifeblood of the United States and creating a national security emergency. 9. Rejection of Operation Northwoods by President Kennedy. An unequivocal and cursory denial of a cogent battle plan to remove the communist menace from Cuba and halt the spread of communism in the Western Hemisphere. 10. President Kennedy refuses to bomb Cuba during the missile crisis. A tepid response to Soviet aggression demonstrates weakness to the world and is a direct threat to U.S. national security. 10. President John F. Kennedy promoted and signed into law a ban on nuclear testing. Trusting the Soviet Union's goodwill with nuclear missiles pointed at the United States leaves 180 million people in the United States hostage to a Soviet attack. Outline of action to convince the public that actions against Castro and Cuba by the Kennedys caused Castro to retaliate with a patsy, a Marxist. The patsy will mold his communist persona in New Orleans. The patsy legend will be linked to the KGB Assassination Bureau by using the patsy imposter in Mexico City. Surveillance photos to be immediately destroyed. On this due date may prompt the invasion of Cuba, or perhaps a surprise nuclear attack on the Soviet Union. Pathfinder overlaps Valkyrie. 1. Codename Pathfinder. 2. Plan against Castro, approved by the President. 3. Collateral use of the U.S. Army Reserves in Dallas, the Special Services Unit. 4. Assassination will be blamed on a communist. 5. Assets on site, along with organized crime, sharpshooters, spotters, exiles, mercenaries triangulating against the President. Government and new President will control the public propaganda to blame the patsy. All participants to be buried, restricted with acronyms and disinformation in hidden locations.
That's incredible, exclaimed Meinkewitz. We better get this to Garrison ASAP. Patch, the people who planned this viewed this as a military plan. Patch nodded, and now these same people are after Jim Garrison. They're gonna kill him, Patch. No, Ray, they're gonna do worse. They're going to destroy him. Chapter 22, Vietnam Combat Deaths, June 1967, 449. 977 Mulberry Road, Grassley, Louisiana, June 11, 1967. Let me just say this, said Patch, still in a cantankerous mood with Natalie's departure. Oswald was never on the 6th floor during the shooting. He even said he was on the 1st floor eating lunch. He saw Junior Jarman walking by him. Jarman said, I don't see how Oswald could have been on the 6th floor. I know Oswald was in that lunchroom. We can very easily race into a hall of mirrors, Ray. It doesn't get us any closer to the men who decided to kill Kennedy. Well, I agree with that. That's what they want, said Meinkewitz as he descended the stairs. Send us spinning. Think about it, said Mike. You're gonna kill the president, who was due near Dealey Plaza before 12:30. The motorcade was late. The Hughes film shows nobody in that 6th floor window. That photo needs to be blown up on display boards, Ray, said Patch, forgetting as he looked around for Natalie, even though she had left yesterday morning. I was drawn to the fact that the FBI confiscated photographs from a couple dozen people, said Meinkewitz. All gone. There were specific pictures of that 6th floor window, according to Harold Weisberg. Let's not forget the Deltex building. Missing photos of that, too. And why did the Zapruder film go to the Kodak laboratories? Patch placed both his hands on the table. Okay, I remember the man's name, Dino Brugioni. There's the man who saw the Zapruder film before they tampered with it. Well, that's a bold accusation. I saw the hole in back of Kennedy's head. Yet in the Zapruder film, the back of his head is darkened. How? Why? Then you've seen the film, asked Mike. He has, said Meinkewitz. Mike, that NBC attack on Garrison is coming in a few weeks. I want us to outline what we think they're going to say and do and have rebuttals sent to local and national news outlets on blank paper. I'll get on it, said Mike as he looked back and then headed up the stairs. Patch, said Meinkewitz, moving toward the centipede. He sat in front of the computer and began a boot up of the IBM 360. Patch leaned toward the brightening monitor. Ray, you have a system here that won't exist for 25 years to the general public. Is it enough? You'll know once you get additional software. Meinkewitz began typing on the keyboard. In a few minutes, the graphic blue outlined images hovered over a rough brown plane spread across the screen. So what are you suggesting, Ray? What I said before. Produce sufficient energy to propel that bubble that we can't even see back along its previous path. When I was at the dam in the first timeline, something drew that bubble back and beyond 1986 from my departure point at Hastings Mountain into New Jersey across from New York City. Meinkewitz rotated in his chair. I just don't know what happened. Patch, his thoughts wavering, stared at the screen and then he spoke slowly and deliberately. What about Moon, wherever he is? Does he have an answer? I don't know. Damn, this is all just too much. Meinkewitz looked up at him. Patch, I know you're upset about Natalie. You really cared about her. Sometimes we're hit head on with choices where we lose something we deeply care about, no matter what we do. Even if we make the morally correct decision. Not what's in our self-interest, but what's right. Patch pursed his lips and sat on the counter. He looked into Meynkewitz's hazel eyes and pointed at him. You wrote a letter to me in the second timeline. Oh yeah? What did I say? I'll share the rest with you later, but you signed it the way I feel right now. He put his hand on Meynkewitz's shoulder. Always your friend. Remember that. I will. And remember, time brings all things to pass. Patch nodded and left through the main office. He climbed the stairs but rounded the staircase to the second-floor stairway to Natalie's room with the lace curtains. The blue comforter was perfectly stretched over the bed, and the sunlight brightened the white walls. Patch pulled back the curtain and followed the grass-rutted road along the field. He could just barely see the log at the far end of the forest edge. With his fingers on the glass, he spoke clearly. Time brings all things to pass. 977 Mulberry Street, Grassley, Louisiana, June 15th, 1967. Meinkewitz did a double take. What do you want to say, Patch? That this program is 100 times worse than Phelan's and Ainsworth's article. Power of NBC, reaching millions, has been hijacked by the intelligence agencies. Do you realize how they fear Garrison? This is a war, Ray. When I first returned, I felt like giving up, but I don't feel that way anymore. I hate these people and what they've done to our country. Dr. Mike adjusted the antenna on the console TV. If these bastards would just read Rousseau's testimony in the correct order, not backwards, there is no leading of the witness, said Meinkewitz as he started pacing. I can't believe these people. Rousseau came up with the name Bertrand and called him the big white-haired guy. This was Rousseau, and Rousseau alone, said Patch. Dr. Mike held up a piece of paper. According to some of the teletypes, parts of the governments are illegally spying on Garrison. People are embedded into the investigation. His office is wired. They tap his phone and attack his investigation. Somebody has to get to TV and go point by point to these lies, said Patch, lowering his head. Well, good luck on that one, said Meinkewitz. It's all sewn up. If they say you're an idiot, you're an idiot. If you're really an idiot and they say you're a genius, you're a genius. What about Garrison? Asked Patch. Garrison is a patriot. Chapter 26, 977 Mulberry Road, Grassley, Louisiana, July 29th, 1967. Patch, said Meinkewitz as he trotted up the porch. He carried his blue box. Patch turned down the stereo as the station began playing the #1 song in the country. What's up, Ray? Meinkewitz stared at the stereo player. Well, I have good news and bad news. I'll take the good news, said Patch. I have good news, too. Good news is that the courier who picked up the drop at the Hotel Charlemagne delivered the envelope to the district attorney's office. What's your good news? Patch turned up the stereo to the Doors' Light My Fire. As of right now, the Doors hold the #1 slot with Light My Fire. You're kidding, said Meinkewitz, putting his hands over his ears as Patch tapped his foot on the hardwood. Whatever happened to the Chattanooga choo-choo? The train left the station, Ray, said Patch. I thought everyone was listening to that Dr. Pepper. And along comes the Doors, and it's Sergeant Pepper's. Meynkewitz's face grew serious. Now the bad news. Finney, he's missing. Patch sat up. We don't know whether it's our side or the Viet Cong who has him. He may be dead. Did he contact Westbrook? He radioed to General Comstock that he did. That may have been his undoing. Denali told me that intel says Finney was brought to the Long Binh jail just outside Saigon. Place is a hellhole. He was captured by those CIA types, said Patch. Can't the general get him out? Or not without compromising his Milky Way identity. Plus, they think Finney is Maddox. Either way, he's going through a living hell. We don't know what he knows or if they know what he knows. Can't just leave him to rot in our own prison, said Patch, shutting off the stereo. Meinkewitz pressed his lips. Patch, he may be dead for sure this time. Meinkewitz turned up the volume on the portable TV. Senator Kennedy was being interviewed on a city street by reporters. Wait, here's Bobby Kennedy.
Senator Kennedy, what do you think of the panel that was set up by President Johnson yesterday? The panel, do you think that all of them are qualified enough for this kind of job?
I haven't had a chance to study it, but I listened to the president's speech last night, and it seemed to me a very high-level panel.
Senator, what do you think of the speech? Was it too soft, too hard, or do you think the president hit the nail on the head?
No, I think it's very helpful to have the president speak on these matters. As I say, we're in a major crisis, and it seems to me that action is imperative, not now, but yesterday. I think, as I said, I think it's absolutely necessary to make it clear that we will not tolerate lawlessness or disorder or violence. But at the same time, while we make that clear and while we were successful in doing that, we have to deal with the basic underlying cause of this unhappiness and this disillusionment with our government and the disillusionment with society. If people don't feel that they are going to be able to resolve their problems and their difficulties through peaceful means, and I think that the discouragement is such that they are apt to move in a different direction.
That man is a leader. Why isn't Johnson out there? Asked Meinkewitz. Bobby's right. We do have a major crisis. (977) Mulberry Road, Grassley, Louisiana, August 15th, 1967. Mike, I wanted you in on this one. I'm going to put Patch under as he goes through what happened at Dealey Plaza. I'd be interested in the forensics. Well, you'll hear it all, Mike. We'll send it right to Garrison's office, said Meinkewitz as he swabbed Patch's arm with alcohol. I want to hear about the retrograde also, the exact instant it was triggered. You got it, Ray, said Patch seriously. Once he began to go under, Patch recalled what happened on that fateful day when the president was murdered. Oswald went into work, Ray, no gun. Rode in with that neighbor, Frazier. He just went into work, into the school book depository, which relocated to Elm Street less than a year before. They set it all up, and they had Payne bring Oswald into that job. Traffic on Elm Street, in front of the depository, concrete pergola and the stockade fence. Sun breaks through the haze. Air is warming. Hertz car rental sign was right there on top of the depository roof. Less than an hour. The president's motorcade will go down Main Street, slow down, turn right onto Houston, and then onto Elm. There's a plainclothes cop and a railroad worker. We thought we'd be arrested. And then we saw Jack Ruby, the gun runner, pull up in a truck lettered air conditioning. Anybody with guns? Asked Mike. Maybe. Some guy in his 20s goes up the hill carrying something in a case. Did you find a spot to watch the motorcade, Patch? Asked Meinkewitz. Patch shook his head. No. We went to the Dallas Morning News when the FBI didn't cancel the route. I called them. I did. It's okay, Patch. It's okay. A man in a plaid shirt steps away from the stockade fence and approaches a stocky man in a blue business suit and black hat. They speak for a short time, and then the man in a plaid shirt returns to the stockade fence area. A policeman follows the man along the fence. At the Morning News, we again see Jack sitting on a desk speaking with a salesman and people in the advertising area. What he said. What did he say? Asked Meinkewitz. Something about watching the fireworks in the plaza. Oh my God. Honest Joe's Pawn Shop. The truck. It's parked near the depository. 12:15. Kennedy's supposed to be here now. He's late. Man upstairs in the building, not Oswald. Man in the far left-hand window. He holds what looks like a rifle. Then he backs inside. At the opposite end, a dark-skinned man by the window. On the far end of the 5th floor, and a blonde-haired man in a brown coat passes by the window. 2 men fiddle with something in that east window. Why weren't we told all this? Patch shook his head. We were right there, Sherry and I, near the northern white pergolas across from the Main Street traffic light, in the heart of Dealey Plaza. That's when it happens. I was in the way of history. The hair on my arms crackle with static electricity. Digits on the Hertz sign change ever so slowly, and people and cars hardly move. All because I was in a position to stop that motorcade. All because I was in a position to stop that motorcade. The outside light dims. My feet are several inches off the asphalt. I can't stop the president's motorcade now. I can't stop it. I heard you, Patch. I see Mrs. Kennedy in her pink suit and matching pillbox hat. Everything slows down. Conley and his wife in front of the president. Men in fedora hats. High-level intelligence operatives. I'm not going to stop that motorcade, and I know it. I run inside the depository. Everything is still slowed down. There he is, damn it. Oswald sits in the booth on the right side with his hand wrapped around a glass Coke bottle. He wears a brown shirt with a strange lapel collar, open over his undershirt. As Oswald reads the newspaper, I stare at the back of his trimmed dark hair. He could easily go to the first floor and watch the parade. So he really wasn't on the 6th floor. I climbed the stairs, and 4 women watched the approaching motorcade in the 3rd pair of windows on the triple underpass side of the building. I would have seen anybody on those stairs. There was nobody. I see 3 Negro men eating lunch by the 5th floor windows. The 6th floor has new plywood floor. Boxes partially block the window and above the 3 men on the lower floor. The elevator is frozen on the 5th floor.
What about the evidence? Asked Meinkewitz.
A rifle has 7.65 Mauser stamped on the barrel, wedged between rows of open boxes in a single box. Near the opposite windows, a dark-haired man with horn-rimmed glasses and a brown coat moves almost imperceptibly in retrograde toward the Mauser. A wall of boxes and a second set of boxes along the lower brick casing of the wall. One box rests on the brick windowsill, leans against another box. Shell on the floorboard. Near the bottom box against the painted bricks. A foot away, a second shell, identical, in the floor crevice next to the bricks. The last shell is diagonal on the floor next to the cardboard box. All before the president's motorcade arrives. All lined up. Guns don't eject like that. Outside, the stockade fence, a white Impala passes a blue and white Oldsmobile station wagon and a black Ford with Texas plates. The man in the Ford has a phone or a radio in the car. The driver of the Ford holds a mobile unit in his hand. Red mud or dirt covers the paint all the way up to the Impala's windows. The car leaves the lot. A man in a khaki uniform has a movie camera between the pergola and the stockade fence. Behind the fence, 3 men throw something into a red pickup truck, headed for the rail yard. The front motorcycles turn near Elm Street. The light-colored Ford, the lead car, enters Houston Street. Patch spread out his arms. I'm on the street now. I see the president lean toward Jackie. I try to grab the car door, but only bump the dimensional barrier.
Well, that makes sense. I understand, Patch.
In Tampa, the motorcycles were alongside the presidential limousine, but not in Dallas. I run by the president as the car lines toward Elm Street. Depository doorway turn as the president's car approaches. I think I see Oswald in the doorway, but I'm not sure. The motorcade almost stops at the Houston Street corner. Onto Elm Street, driver hits the curb. No agents on the limousine running boards. There's a dark-skinned man in a light blue jersey on the curb past the sign. I've seen that guy before. He has a dark beret and he waves at the president, and a man with an umbrella pushes it up and down. The first shot. A spiraling gray swirl from the top of the county records building. The bullet's trail crosses the plaza and produces a spark on the asphalt near the president's car. Kennedy stops waving to the crowd. The president's head whips from left to right. He stiffens as the bullet enters below his right shoulder. Jackie tilts toward the president. No one shooting from the 6th floor corner window. Another gray bullet trail from the far corner of the triple underpass pierces the windshield. The president's hands tighten. The governor holds his Stetson, turns his right shoulder ever so slowly. The president's hands jerk up toward his throat, and he lurches to the left. He's been hit through the Adam's apple. Ray, my God! Glass chips from the windshield cut shrapnel wounds in Kennedy's face. Another one. Second floor window of the Daltex building. Bullet misses the car, but scatters the curb's concrete chips. A dark-haired man, bystander, standing below the center underpass. He's hit, blood on his cheek. Patch squinted as he spoke slowly. From the western end of the depository's upper windows, a gray pipe bullet trail pushes down into the plaza. The governor's shoulder moves downward at a sharp angle, and his cheeks balloon out. His wife pulls him to the other side of the limo, face contorted. In front of the pergola, a woman steadies a man in a dark suit and hat in place. He's holding a movie camera. Zapruder! It must be Zapruder! The limousine driver turns and the car stops for a long time. The brake lights were red. A flash and a ring of smoke from the tree clump. Workers on the triple underpass turn as the man in the suit bends over the fence. The skinny railroad man with glasses and the thin mustache points toward the flash. A bullet trail from the hill rips into the grass. A hatless cop with shooter's glasses. He has a rifle. I see his badge in the sun. The young man filming near the stockade fence drops to the ground as if he were in combat. At the left side of the triple underpass, a flash and smoke preceded the spinning gray path of a bullet. Oh God, this is it, Ray. The kill shot. Jackie holds him. Kennedy moves slightly forward, his hands near his throat. A massive gun smoke drifts into the plaza. Ray, a bullet enters Kennedy's head obliquely at the temple. Kennedy's skull explodes in brain matter and spray cascaded back and nearly knocks the left motorcycle patrolman off his cycle. Another bullet instantaneously smashes into the back of JFK's head, hurling him forward. The wound, about the size of a baseball in the back of his head. A chunk of the president's skull bone tumbles over the limo's trunk, and half of his brain is exposed out of the pink cerebellum. Oh no! Oh no! Patch began to cry. It's all right, Patch. It's all right. We can stop this, said Meinkewitz. The upper left depository window. More. Gray trail toward the car. Hits the governor in the wrist and the thigh. These bastards. A middle-aged man with long dark hair in an open white shirt and khaki pants running toward the cars on the railroad side. He has a transceiver. On the hill. Cop kicks the man with the camera in the buttocks. As the man yells up at him, the policeman waves a shot. Then the man removes the film canister from his camera and throws it at the policeman. The security man pushes Jackie back in the limo. He gives a thumbs down gesture back to the car full of agents behind the limo. The man in the dark suit atop the hill looks toward the tracks. The cop with no hat is next to the stockade fence. Then, inside the wooden fence, the man in the suit with the rifle securely against his chest. He nears a metal extension following the railroad tracks. A man in gray railroad coveralls and a hat is waiting. The man in the suit lofts the rifle over the extended pipe. The railroad worker catches it, tense, and then compacts his body. He's kneeling behind a railroad switching box. He detaches specific components of the rifle, one by one. The worker neatly slid each part of the rifle into a brakeman's bag. Now he's walking nonchalantly north, up the railroad tracks. The man who waved the umbrella relaxes on the curb with the man in the blue shirt and beret. The man in the beret speaks into a walkie-talkie with a long antenna. The man in the dark suit returns to the fence area behind the plaza. A Dallas policeman, revolver drawn, runs up the hill and confronts him with his handgun. The man in the suit shows his empty hands and pulls out identification. It looks like Barker, Bernard Barker, in a light shirt. I stood next to him. I know Barker. I met Barker from the plaza, under the bridge, near where the curb has been shattered by a bullet. The dark-haired man touches the blood on his cheek. The man with the beret has some type of device strapped to the small of his back. He walks away, unconcerned, down the sidewalk in the direction of the triple underpass. Oswald on top of the depository steps, something in his hands as if he were praying. A helmeted policeman drops his motorcycle and barrel-ass diagonally through the disoriented crowd toward the steps. Then he stops just outside the building. Back in the center of the plaza, most of the parade spectators begin to run up the hill toward the stockade fence. Baker Finch. I see Baker Finch down the alleyway. But I didn't know it at the time. Someone who looks like Oswald gets into a light-colored Nash Rambler station wagon pulled over to the curb. That's weird. A Cadillac almost hits the Rambler. I come out of the retrograde. I see Sherry and I tell her. Oswald was up to his eyeballs in this. But he was at a booth in the lunchroom. Somebody stashed a gun and shells upstairs before this even happened. There must be fingerprints on those boxes up there. This morning, I called. Sherry. The radio is telling the cops to be on the lookout for a 30-year-old. 30, slender build, 5 foot 10 inches, weight 165 pounds. Reported to be armed with what is thought to be a .30 caliber rifle. We cross the street when I see Lansdale. I saw him in 61 and 63. The bastard flipped governments, Ray.
I know he did, Patch. Slow down, Patch. Slow down. That's enough.
I told her Lansdale was a general and that this was a government-run assassination.
Okay, Patch, okay.
Meinkewitz handed a Coke to Patch.
There's a lot to digest here, Patch. Just sit back.
Like it happened all over again, but worse.
That's it with Dealey Plaza. No more. We'll get this in written form. Dr. Mike, bring Patch upstairs. Put on some of his music.
Come on, Patch. Patch stood, his eyes glassy, and he shook his head. I just wish I could forget it all.
District Attorney Jim Garrison rebuttal to the NBC White Paper, July 15, 1967. What time is it, Ray? Asked Patch from the living room recliner. Meinkewitz removed a cigar from the case on the mantel. Almost 7. The FCC said the NBC White Paper was biased. So Garrison gets a 30-minute rebuttal. The White Paper has already sent ripples through the jury pool for Shaw's trial, said Meinkewitz as he lit the cigar. Patch enjoyed the aroma, even though he never smoked cigars. Well, let's hope he knocks it out of the park. The announcer began by speaking after the NBC logo faded.
The following time period has been made available to District Attorney Jim Garrison of New Orleans to reply to an NBC News program broadcast on June 19th. In that program, NBC News examined some of the methods used by Mr. Garrison in his investigation of what he charges was a conspiracy to assassinate President Kennedy. Except for the opening and closing announcements, this program has been prepared under Mr. Garrison's sole supervision. Mr. Garrison.
Tonight I'm going to talk to you about truth and about fairy tales, about justice and about injustice. In the months to follow, you're going to learn that many of the things which some of the major news agencies have been telling you are untrue. You're going to learn that although you are citizens of the United States, information concerning the cause of the death of your president has been withheld from you. In the months to come, you will learn to your own satisfaction that President Kennedy was not killed by a lone assassin. You will learn that there has been and continues to be a concerted effort to keep you from learning these facts. And you will learn, I assure you, that what I have been trying to tell you and what I'm telling you tonight is true. As children, we become accustomed to hearing fairy tales. They're always pleasant stories, and they're comforting to hear because good always triumphs over evil. At least, this is the way it is in fairy tales. Fairy tales are not dangerous for our children, and are probably even good for them up to a point. However, in the real world, in which you and I must live, fairy tales are dangerous. They're dangerous because they're untrue. Anything which is untrue is dangerous. And it is all the more dangerous when a fairy tale becomes accepted as reality simply because it has an official seal of approval, or because honorable men announce that you must believe it. or because powerful elements of the press tell you that the fairy tale is true. The conclusion of the Warren Report that President Kennedy was killed by a lone assassin is a fairy tale. This does not mean that the men on the Warren Commission were aware at the time that their conclusion was totally untrue, nor does it mean necessarily that these men had any sinister motives. It does mean that the conclusion that no conspiracy existed and that Lee Oswald was the lone assassin is a fiction and a myth, and that it should be brought to an end. The people of this country don't have to be protected from the truth. This country was not built on the idea that a handful of nobles, whether located in our federal agencies in Washington, D.C., or in the news agencies in New York, should decide what was good for the people to know and what they should not know. This is a totalitarian concept which presumes that the leaders of our federal government and the men in control of the powerful press media constitute a special elite, which by virtue of their nobility and their brilliance empower them to think for the people. Personally, I would rather put my confidence in the common sense of the people of this country. The truth about the assassination of the president has been concealed from you long enough. Those forces which are fighting so hard today to tell you that they have examined the Warren Report and that everything is fine and that our investigation has uncovered nothing, are not merely going to lose this fight, they have already lost it. Now let me tell you why President Kennedy was murdered and how he was murdered. I also want to give you a few examples which will show you how the conclusion reached by the Warren Commission is totally impossible. President Kennedy was assassinated by men who sought to obtain a radical change in our foreign policy, particularly with regard to Cuba. You recall that under President Kennedy, the Cold War began to thaw, and there were new signs of an effort on the part of the Soviet Union and ourselves to understand each other. On the map, this appears to be merely a large island off the coast of Florida. But for many men, it meant a good deal more than this. In 1963, a great variety of interests existed which not only desired an American-supported invasion of Castro's Cuba, but took it for granted that it was inevitable. In the minds of many men, this island represented a tremendous emotional landmark because they had steered their courses toward it for so long and with such intensity. In the fall of 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis occurred. It was followed by a pronounced new attitude towards Cuba on the part of the United States. Cuba, after this, was no longer regarded as an enemy and was no longer regarded as fair game for those men who, for one reason or another, focused their attention on this island. The new signs of understanding between Russia and the United States continued to develop. In June of 1963, President Kennedy, addressing students at the American University in Washington, told them, "We breathe the same air as the Russians." He said we should try to live together in peace on this earth. Well, at this point, some individuals transferred their hostile attention from Fidel Castro to John F. Kennedy. They planned the president's assassination, and they planned it well. The evidence indicates that he was shot at from two different directions in the rear, and also from the right front. We know that shooting was coming from two separate directions in the rear because the president and Governor Connolly were hit in the back within a split second of each other. And this necessarily had to happen with two bullets coming from two different rifles. We know that the president was being shot at from the grassy knoll area on the right front because most of the people in Dealey Plaza heard the shots coming from there, and because at least one of the president's wounds was an entry wound from the front, and because men were seen running from the grassy knoll area immediately afterwards. That's why the idea of Lee Harvey Oswald as the lone assassin of the president is a fairy tale and should be brought to an end. If you the people of the United States will learn the truth that the president was assassinated by men who were once connected with a Central Intelligence Agency, of course, this might reflect on the dignity of the CIA. But I happen to believe that our form of government is strong enough to survive the truth. I believe that you are entitled to the truth about how your president was shot down in the street and how it was done. Instead, some of the most powerful news agencies we have in our country have worked hard to convince you that everything is all right. They do not tell you that Lee Harvey Oswald's fingerprints were not found on the gun which was supposed to have killed the president. And they do not tell you that nitrate tests exonerated Lee Oswald from the actual shooting by showing that he had not fired a rifle that day. And they do not tell you that it was virtually impossible for Oswald to have taken his fingerprints off the gun, hidden the gun, and gone down 4 flights of stairs by the time he was seen on the 2nd floor. Above all, they do not tell you of the overwhelming eyewitness testimony that shots were coming from behind the stone wall on the grassy knoll. In a choice between official dignity and the truth, dignity was given priority, and so you have not received the full truth. This is why there continue to be hundreds of documents still hidden from your eyes and classified as secret, and some of them bear such titles as Lee Harvey Oswald's accessibility to information about the U-2, the Central Intelligence Agency's dossier on Lee Harvey Oswald, and a CIA file on Jack Ruby. You have not been told that Lee Oswald was in the employ of United States intelligence agencies, but this was the case, and so I am telling you. Why, this young, uneducated man had learned to speak Russian even before he left the Marines, and there's only one way he could have learned that. Oswald had a higher security rating than his buddies in his Marine unit. During 12 hours of questioning, to give you another example, 12 hours of questioning after the assassination, there is no transcript of Oswald's statements available for you to look at. Now, it doesn't matter where you live. If somebody in your town steals a 1928 Hupmobile, what he says is written down when he's questioned. However, when the man who has just killed the President of the United States is questioned for 12 hours, no transcript is available. There's nothing for you to look at. And believe it or not, one of the explanations given is that the room was too small to include a stenographer. And here's something else. This case has more accidental fires, more burning of paper than any murder case in history. For example, when Oswald was questioned by a federal agent in August of 1963, the notes of the interview were later burned. You cannot see the notes made by Commander Hughes concerning the president's autopsy because he burned them too. One of the questioners of Lee Harvey Oswald during the 12-hour session burned his notes. And similarly, when the Warren Commission contacted the State Department and said, with regard to Exhibit 948, we noticed that a one-page message from the CIA containing secret information is supposed to be attached to this file, and it's missing. Would you please furnish us with a copy of this missing secret document? The answer given to the Warren Commission was that the secret message about Oswald from the CIA was accidentally destroyed while being thermofaxed. This spontaneous combustion, incidentally, occurred the day after the president's assassination. I'm not even going to bother to dignify the foolishness which Newsweek and NBC and some of the other news agencies have tried to make you believe about my office. I've been District Attorney of New Orleans for more than 5 years, and we have never had a single case reversed because of improper methods on the part of our staff. Nor do we rush to judgment on half-baked evidence. And the proof of that is the fact that in more than 5 years, not one defendant has walked out of the courtroom in a murder case with an acquittal. Nor have we lost a major case in 5 years. Then what is their game? Their game is to fool you. These people want the investigation stopped. They don't want a trial at all. Please believe me, they don't think we're wrong in our investigation. Obviously, if our investigation was as haywire as they would like to have you think, then you would not see such a coordinated barrage coming from the news centers in the East. Why are they so concerned? Why is it that they cannot wait until the trial comes in order to learn what the facts are? Why are they so anxious to have their own trials? They know very well that the witnesses they're presenting to you have not been testifying under oath, that they're not being cross-examined as they would be at a trial, and that the opportunities for timely rebuttal by the state of Louisiana, which would exist at a trial, have not been provided in their untrue presentations. They know this. In my considered judgment, there has been an effort to prejudice in advance the potential jurors in the trial of this case. As a matter of fact, the National Broadcasting Company has already had the trial. The defendant was found innocent, and the district attorney was convicted. They announced across the nation that my methods were improper. But as their stories, one by one, turn out to be false, they do not reveal this to you, but simply search hopefully into new areas. For example, Newsweek magazine had a feature article saying that my office attempted to bribe a man named Bobuff. It later turned out that his story and their article was totally untrue, and the tape which Newsweek described had been altered. The police investigators in my office were found innocent of any wrongdoing in a serious investigation conducted by the police department. However, Newsweek has made virtually no mention of that. Similarly, in its recent effort to make you think that my methods are improper, NBC announced coast to coast that it had located the real Clay Bertrand, that an NBC man had talked to him. This made every newspaper in the country, and it inferred, once again, that in addition to using terrible methods, we were off on a wild goose chase. Now, when it turned out that this was a total fabrication, and the man whom NBC identified as the real Clay Bertrand hotly denied ever using the name, there was only coast-to-coast silence from NBC. NBC presented a professional burglar whom my office had just recently convicted and allowed him to make a plainly false presentation that we had tried to get him to climb into the defendant's apartment and plant evidence there. The inference, of course, was that this particular defendant was too lofty a character to participate in my nefarious schemes. However, recently, when we called him before the New Orleans grand jury so that he could tell all about our new venture into the burglary business, he took the Fifth Amendment when asked if his statement on NBC was true. Once again, this was followed by loud silence from coast to coast on NBC. As a matter of fact, the Warren Commission's inquiry into the assassination started off with a completely unacceptable philosophy. For a democracy like ours, one of its stated objectives was to calm the fears of the people about a conspiracy. But in our country, the government has no right to calm our fears any more than it has, for example, the right to excite our fears about Red China or about fluoridation or about birth control or about anything. There's no room in America for thought control of any kind, no matter how benevolent the objective. Personally, I don't want to be calm about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. I don't want to be calm about a president of my country being shot down in the streets. And I don't want to be calm about the fact that for reasons of public policy or national security or any other phony reason, the true facts have been withheld from the people of this country. If the day has come when it is possible to shoot our president down because some men disagree with his foreign policy. And the day has come that the moment his heart stops beating, other considerations take over which conceal the total truth from the citizens of the United States. Then the day has come when we have ceased to be a democracy. I cannot believe that this is so, that the time has come in America when the people no longer control their country. Yet I must confess that I'm appalled by the readiness with which some of the major press media have accepted the great fairy tale without hesitation, rousing from their stupor only when they have learned that a district attorney was violating all the rules of etiquette and digging up the truth. They're telling you that black is white when they tell you there is no evidence of a conspiracy. They have to know well the significance of the continued concealment of X-rays and autopsy pictures, which, if revealed to you, would show that the president was hit by rifle fire from more than one direction. And they have to know well of the hundreds of documents which remain classified secret and concealed from your view. And they're making white black when they repeatedly state that my office is using improper methods. They have to know that no DA's office in the United States would dream of operating in the way they suggest. They have to know that for years I have been a strong defender of the rights of individuals. They have to know all of this, but they have lent themselves to the all-out effort to convince you that the matter's been looked into, and anyone who raises a question now is irresponsible, or a troublemaker, or an enemy of the people. What's that? You say that you are an American citizen and you want to see the autopsy X-rays, and you want to see these hundreds of documents that have been withheld from your view, and you want to know why these vital notes always ended up being burned? What's the matter with you? Can't you take the word of these honorable men who've looked into it for you? Let me just give you one example that shows you how impossible the single assassination theory is, which shows you the enormity of the fairy tale which you're supposed to believe in. Now, this is the Warren Commission's own diagram of the route of the bullet through Governor Connally. The bullet had to take this route in order to cause the injuries which he received. Now, the important thing to keep in mind is that the Warren Commission itself concedes that if this same bullet was not the one which also went through President Kennedy, then there had to be someone else firing. And the reason for that, just to put it very simply, is the Zapruder films have shown that all the firing occurred in 6 seconds, and yet there were a total of 8 wounds. Therefore, this one bullet has to cause 7 wounds, because one missed and one was the fatal shot hitting the president. So, by the Warren Commission's own admission, prior to hitting the governor, this bullet had to go through President Kennedy, who is sitting back here. Now, you'll notice that the Warren Commission did not attempt to include President Kennedy in the diagram. They could not, because the total impossibility of this bullet having gone through the president also would be too obvious. In other words, by the evidence of the Warren Commission itself, it is obvious that there was other shooting going on in Dealey Plaza. Consequently, the Warren Commission has officially concluded that before this bullet came down from the sky, as it had to hit Governor Connally and all those different places, it entered President Kennedy's body from the rear and came out of his neck. I might add that the Warren Commission did not try to include the president's picture because that would have shown that the course of the magic bullet would have had to gone up in the air and come down again in order to end up hitting the governor. It is by selecting these little portions of each incident and by excluding other portions that the fairy tale is presented to you. However, if they had to show in one diagram the bullet entering the president and then continuing through Governor Connally, you would be able to see the total impossibility of this bullet causing 7 wounds. Now, this is just one of many examples which show that the Warren Commission's conclusion is completely impossible. Bullet 399 is another example. The fact that the cartridges in the Tippett case do not match at all the bullets in Tippett's body, one after the other. If I had the total hour to reply, which NBC used to try and discredit my office, I would be able to go into more matters. But let's sum it up by saying that it is completely impossible to uphold the single assassin theory if you look at it seriously. Anyone who has done their homework knows that the single assassin theory is totally impossible. In the final analysis, what has been done by the Warren Commission in its investigation is to take this series of implausibilities and to attempt to prove to you that each one of them is at least mathematically possible. Each one of them is mathematically possible, but not probable. However, it is not mathematically possible for all of these series of implausibilities to have occurred. And this is what they ask you to believe. It's very much like telling you that it is mathematically possible, for example, for an elephant to hang from a cliff with his tail tied to a daisy. Of course, this is implausible. But what do? They produce an expert who says, yes, I have made a study of the situation, and this is not a full-grown elephant, and this is a particularly tough kind of daisy, and therefore it was mathematically possible. Now, the official truth, as a result of such expert testimony, as a result of the creation of a series of mathematical possibilities, is now no longer what actually happened in Dallas, but what has been officially approved. Well, I say that the matter is not closed, not in this country. I say that the day has not yet arrived when the only reality is power, and the ideals on which our country was built are merely words printed on paper. I believe that those news agencies which have sought to imply that I would use improper methods to gain some sort of fictional political advantage have simply revealed their own cynicism. I believe that in this conflict between truth and power, and this is exactly what it is all about, that power cannot possibly smash truth out of existence. The people in this country will not let that happen. If we still live in the same country in which we were born, and I don't think it's changed that much, if this is still the country in which, in the words of our Pledge of Allegiance, there exists liberty and justice for all, then this attempt to conceal the full truth from you, in the end, has to be a failure. Now, in this case, I've learned more about the human race than I really wanted to know. And I've learned more about some of our government agencies than I really wanted to know. And I've learned more about some of our press agencies than I cared to know. But I am still naive enough to believe that in America, the people make the decisions, not a handful of men in the Washington and New York areas. And I believe that the people of America want to know the entire truth about how their president was shot down in the streets of Dallas. And I want to assure you that as long as I am alive, no one is going to stop me from seeing that you obtain the full truth, and nothing less than the full truth, and no fairy tales.
Time for the preceding program was made available to District Attorney Jim Garrison of New Orleans. The program was prepared under his sole supervision. It constitutes his reply to an earlier NBC News program examining some of the methods Mr. Garrison has used in his investigation of the assassination of President Kennedy. This program originated in the studios of WDSU-TV in New Orleans.
Now what? Asked Patch. He made a strong pitch, but Who's going to believe him? And the onslaught will continue. Meinkewitz held the cigar out between his fingers. I trust in the American people. But even if a majority believe Garrison, the government will crush the narrative down to a point where nothing can be done. Chapter 27, Vietnam Combat Deaths, August 1967, 466. Mississippi Delta steamboat cruising the Mississippi, August 15, 1967, 7:24 p.m. Meinkewitz told Patch he'd be taking a late afternoon cruise up the Mississippi River. His contact, Doug Weymouth, was not a researcher, yet Denali assured him Weymouth was well aware of all aspects of the Kennedy case. Weymouth had the means to get Patch's last revelation to the Garrison investigation. Patch, holding a white tube, spoke with a man and a woman, Joe and Bobby Williams, both drinking Tom Collins's as they leaned on the rail. The huge but loud paddle boat moved upriver, the tree-lined shore moving swiftly in the distance. The Williamses were both football fans and looking forward to the Saints playing in New Orleans soon. Patch regaled them with detailed Super Bowl scenes at the Coliseum. Around 6:30, a slender man with short brown dark hair and serious demeanor approached Patch. "Excuse me, are you Gary Paulson?" he asked Patch. "I am, Don Weymouth." "We'll be talking to you, Gary," said Bobby Williams. "Nice talking to you, Mr. Paulson," said Joe. He guided Weymouth, a man with deep dark eyes, over to a whitewood bar. "Can I buy you a drink, Mr. Weymouth?" "That would be fine and dandy." "Beer all right?" asked Patch. Weymouth nodded. "2 beers." "Dixie okay?" asked the bartender. "Dixie is fine." The bald-headed bartender filled 2 Pilsner glasses from the tap and then slid them onto the bar. Patch put down a 5 and left the change. "Thank you, sir," said the bartender. Patch brought Weymouth over to one of the round tables overlooking the splashing paddle wheel. "What brought you into the Kennedy assassination?" asked Patch. Weymouth held both hands on the glass rim as he sighed. "Well, I guess you could say that the Kennedy assassination came to me." "How so?" "I was there." Patch raised his brow. "Then I'd ask, Mr. Weymouth, what do you know?" "Too much. That seems, from what I've learned, to be a definite liability," said Patch. Weymouth swished the beer around the tall glass. "I've had people after me, forced off the road." "I take it you saw things that they didn't want you to see," suggested Patch. "Yes, sir. Saw things with that rifle, and then with Oswald himself, I was getting calls just telling me to shut up." "I saw Kennedy get hit," said Patch, a hole in the back of his head. "Oh, God. I arrived at Dealey Plaza just after the shooting. There was a traffic jam, and it's tough just getting across the road." Patch set down his beer. "Who did it, Mr. Weymouth?" "It's above my pay grade, Gary. I tried asking questions behind the stockade fence. People told me the shots came from the area of the grassy knoll behind the picket fence." "You're a cop." "Not too loud, Mr. Paulson, not too loud if you value our lives." "Sure, I understand. I talked to this guy named Roland. Roland and his wife were standing at the top of the grassy knoll, on the north side of Elm Street. He said approximately 15 minutes before President Kennedy arrived, he saw a white man standing in the 6th floor window of the Texas School Book Depository building in the southeast corner, holding a rifle equipped with a telescopic sight. In the southwest corner on the 6th floor, a colored male was pacing back and forth. Mr. Rowland thought it was Secret Service. A few minutes later, the man with the rifle was gone, so he forgot about it." What did this man look like?" asked Patch. "Just glancing, I'd say a Negro." Patch stroked his chin. "We were only yards away from each other, so you weren't near the motorcade when the shots were fired." "No, I turned on the corner to Houston Street and then west onto Elm Street. I heard a rifle shot and sprinted up toward Houston Street. 2 more shots. I ran by the pond and then down the grass between Main and Elm. A Dallas police officer ran up the grassy knoll behind the picket fence near the rail yards. I trailed him, and behind the fence was pandemonium." "You're right. Nobody truly understood what happened. A woman in her 30s tried to drive out of the parking lot in a brown Chevy. I arrested her and brought her to Deputy Sheriff C.I. Lewis. Lewis let her go without getting her name. The whole thing is wrought with instances and omissions said Patch. Do you know, Paulson, that the Deputy Sheriff Buddy Walters never entered the Texas Theater? His partner, Bill Corson, did. He knew about the anti-Castro Cubans living in the Oak Cliff area, and he said he was watching them. Buddy was joined at the hip to Jack Ruby. On November 22, 1963, at approximately 12:40 p.m., I was with Buddy Walters. Traffic was congested. We were looking for marks on the curb when I heard a shrill whistle coming from the other side of Elm Street. A white male in his 20s runs down the grassy knoll as a green Rambler station wagon approached from the east, driven by a bulky Latin guy with wavy dark hair, wearing a tan windbreaker type jacket. He's looking up at the man running toward him. He pulled over to the north curb and picked up the man coming down the hill. A guy claiming to be from the Secret Service stood on the steps of the depository building. I heard nothing of this Secret Service agent's identity until Jim Garrison charged him with being a part of the assassination plot. I called Jim Garrison and told him that this is the man that I seen in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. Jim sent one of his investigators to see me and get a better picture, which I identified. I then learned that this man's name was Edgar Eugene Braden, or Jim Braden. The paddle wheel was like a slow military drumbeat in the darkening Mississippi. I saw him later. I'm aware of his connections, said Patch. I know who he is. He's mob connected. Then with the other sheriffs, I went upstairs directly to the 6th floor. We immediately found 3 rifle cartridges placed right there, right at the southeast corner window. Patch nodded, but did not tell him he had seen the exact same thing only a half an hour before. No more than 1 inch apart, all facing in the same direction. Try that with a bolt-action rifle. 1 cartridge was crimped on the end, which would have held the slug. A small brown paper lunch bag containing some well-cleaned chicken bones lay on the floor. I called across the room for Lieutenant Day. He came over with his camera as Mooney and the others searched the rest of the 6th floor. What about the rifle? I'm getting to that. Northwest corner of the 6th floor, Deputy Eugene Boone found it. I was no more than 8 feet from Boone, next to a stack of cardboard boxes. I saw the rifle lying on the floor with the bolt up. Lieutenant Day and Captain Will Fritz joined us. Lieutenant Day ejected 1 live round of ammunition onto the floor. Seymour Weitzman, a deputy constable, was next to me. Weitzman, a weapons expert, having been in the sporting goods business for many years, Captain Fritz wanted to know what kind of rifle we were dealing with. Weitzman said it was a 7.65 German Mauser. Fritz agreed. Later, Lieutenant Day took the rifle to police headquarters where they flagged it as a 6.5 Mannlicher Carcano Italian carbine, serial number C2766, belonging, they said, to Lee Harvey Oswald. It was a Mauser. How did you see it, sir? I just know. Does Jim Garrison have your story, Mr. Weymouth? Yes, sir. Amazing what shenanigans went on, said Patch. An officer came running down the stairs after that and told Captain Fritz that a Dallas policeman had been shot in the Oak Cliffs area. It was 1:06 p.m. The Dallas dispatcher called Tippett, the officer, at 1:04 p.m. and received no answer. The eyewitnesses said Tippett was shot between 1:05 and 1:08 p.m. Officer Baker had talked to Oswald at 12:35 p.m. in the lunchroom of the Texas School Book Depository. This would give Oswald 30 minutes or less to finish his coke, exit the depository, walk 4 blocks east on Elm, catch a bus and ride it back in the traffic for 2 blocks, get off the bus and walk 2 more blocks to Lamar Street, proceed 4 blocks, and to have a conversation with a cab driver and a woman over the use of a cab, get in the cab, ride to 500 North Beckley Street, get out and walk to 1026 North Beckley, his rooming house, and stay there for a short time. The housekeeper saw Oswald at 1:05 waiting for a bus in front of the rooming house. Somehow he got to East 10th Street and Patton Street, many blocks away, killed Tippett between 1:05 and 1:08 p.m. It's all nonsense, said Patch. He was a patsy, you know it and I know it. The man getting in the Rambler station wagon was Oswald. After Tippit was killed, a dispatch goes out. Suspect, white male, about 27, 5 feet 11 inches, black wavy hair, fair complexion, wearing an Eisenhower-type jacket of light color, dark pants, and a white shirt, armed with a .32 caliber dark finish automatic pistol, which he had in his right hand. Don't know where they got that description. So it was impossible for Oswald to have killed Tippit, asked Patch. Not if he was driving in that Rambler, said Weymouth. Why did a number of squads converge on that theater and envelop it? Why did they give Oswald a chance to run out of the theater? Shoot him dead, said Patch. Bingo. In this tube, said Patch, is a transcript of what I saw. Many of the same events cross over, and there's more that must get to the Garrison investigation without any fanfare. I will do that, sir, said Weymouth, finishing the beer. I know your life has been threatened. You're a patriotic American, Mr. Weymouth. You too, sir, said Weymouth, shaking Patch's hand. Thanks for the beer. Let's pray they find out who killed our president. Amen, said Patch. Weymouth nodded and walked the wood planking to the far end of the riverboat as it chugged up the Mississippi after sunset. He descended the staircase to the gambling table below deck. Patch again turned to the paddle wheel, the churning water and turning paddles now lighted by spotlights below deck. Strangely, he thought about Natalie Tompkins and what had happened to her, and how closely he had come to loving her deeply, but he couldn't let her go, for the woman no longer with him that he loved more. Chapter 28, Vietnam Combat Deaths, September 1967, 460. 977 Mulberry Road, Grassley, Louisiana, September 14, 1967. Meinkewitz, in a bright green jacket with fall approaching, crossed the living room and pointed at Patch in the recliner. Nice jacket, Ray. You working part-time on the highway crew? Hold it, Patch. Denali has decided to provide you with a birthday present, per se. Time portal? Very funny. Although I have been trying to locate Moon, unsuccessfully, I might add. A surprise party, said Patch. Sorry. Patch stood up. My birthday is September 18th, Ray, but my actual age would require calculations by your IBM 360. And listen up, Patch. Denali thinks it's possible that Baker Finch found out you were on that riverboat with Weymouth last month. That's impossible. Nobody knew my name. I talked to a couple named Williams, Joe and Bobby, and of course Weymouth. Look, Patch, doesn't matter now. Mike will be leaving for California tonight, Mendesa's ranch. From there he'll join Finney in Vietnam. You're kidding. He volunteered. Wow. Not a safe place. You're saying that Finch will track us down here at this house? Eventually, yes. Not much to go on, Ray, said Patch, heading for the refrigerator. He grabbed 2 iced tea bottles and handed one to Meinkewitz. Do you think we've accomplished what we were supposed to with Garrison? We'll never know, or at least until he gets a conviction, said Meinkewitz, sipping the tea. Staying at Mulberry Road right now is very dangerous. Chatter throughout the intelligence agencies indicated an operation to help Garrison had been in effect for months north of New Orleans. This house will be reconverted back into a residence, the computer shipped out, and a family moved in here. That's incredible. Finch is getting the total help of the U.S. intel agencies. I see your point. Where will we go, with Denali? We'll be taken by military plane to New York City. Then what? Asked Patch. That's the surprise, Patch, and I'm sure that one of us will like it. What's that supposed to mean? You'll see. CBS Studio 50, 1697 Broadway, Manhattan, New York City, New York, September 17th, 1967. Patch and Meinkewitz disembarked at a landing strip in New Jersey and in a limousine headed toward Manhattan, the buildings painted with the setting sunlight. They were dressed in blazers and spiffy-shined shoes. I look as if I'm going to a college dance, Ray, Meinkewitz smiled and removed a pair of earmuffs. What the? Denali's staff contacted Robert Precht, producer of The Ed Sullivan Show, for tickets for the Doors performance tonight. A huge smile lit up Patch's face. That's fantastic. It's the least we could do for your efforts, Patch. Why the earmuffs? Then he thought, you're not going to wear those when the Doors come out, are you? Meinkewitz barely smiled and tilted his head toward Patch. We'll meet with military members of the network after the show in an undisclosed location. To our next assignment for Denali. Yes, sir. In one of the darkened rear rows for security, Meinkewitz leaned over Patch. 2 men in suits from the Milky Way Network stood at either entrance and would escort Patch and Meinkewitz out when the show ended. I'm actually looking forward to Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet, said Meinkewitz. What are they going to sing, the Chattanooga Choo-Choo? Oh, that would be delightful. Then his smile dropped. Something about Morrison haunts you, Patch. Maybe. Meinkewitz looked up from the program. I heard this guy Dangerfield is really funny. Patch stared downward and then quickly looked up. His voice was almost inaudible and shaky. July 3rd, 1971, Morrison dies of a heroin and alcohol mess in his system. He's found dead in a bathtub in Paris with his common-law wife sleeping in the bed. They bury him right away at the Père Lachaise Cemetery in the eastern part of the city. Well, I didn't know. I'm sorry. I wasn't a huge fan, Ray, until I met Roselli in that studio in L.A. and the Doors performed. Having this knowledge about time sucks. I just don't want this guy to be wasted to death. I understand. But I can't say anything, Ray, because I just don't know what the ramifications will be going into the future. Gives a whole different perspective as you watch Morrison perform tonight. Jesus God. You're right about time travel, Patch. It's risky business. Meinkewitz really did place the earmuffs over his head when the Doors were announced. The stage background seemed tacky with Doors cluttered together and a suspended backdrop in orange and white. Robbie Krieger's lead guitar, behind the center stage with Jim Morrison in a leather jacket and pants, began the intro to People Are Strange. Morrison swaggered in, his Adonis locks bouncing, and he stepped up to the microphone stand as if he were starting a street rumble between the Jets and the Sharks, and indeed he was. The drummer John Densmore, over Morrison's shoulder, kicked in on the drums as Ray Manzarek's nimble fingers danced around the Vox Continental organ and the Fender Rhodes piano bass. Somber, probably stoned, Jim Morrison's distinctive crooning was like a shaman spirit spreading across the shadows, with the curmudgeon Ed Sullivan simmering off stage. Other than Morrison, the rest of the Doors wore white sport coats. A more reasoned side of Patch told him to mind his own business about Morrison. What Morrison did with his life, or anyone else, as a matter of fact, was in the realm of God, not Patch Kincaid. He pinched the bridge of his nose, drifting back in his mind to when he was a kid in the first timeline, when the news from Paris arrived that summer, reporting the useless death of a rock legend. Meinkewitz stared at the band as if he were suffering from consuming a dozen grapefruits in a grapefruit-eating contest. Patch's mentor seemed confused and was probably praying to God that Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet would prance out from behind the curtain and rescue him from the debauchery. Morrison's voice cut at the heart of the emotion swirling within Patch. Why had Denali arranged the meeting with military men later that evening? And how had Baker Finch penetrated the network security? With Weymouth's delivery of the tube to the investigation, they had, over months, provided a number of leads that Patch hoped would be followed. Both Patch and Meinkewitz laughed heartily, shedding the pressure of months of risky assignments for Denali within the network. A black comedian named Flip Wilson had Meinkewitz slapping his knee. Patch's eyes watered from laughter. It was the duo husband and wife team of Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet piping out a Cole Porter medley that caught Menkiewitz's attention and set his foot tapping. Patch, clowning around, put the earmuffs on for a few seconds. When the Doors returned, Jim Morrison pulled the microphone from the stand, but remained in a restrained mode as Ray Manzarek repeated the now familiar #1 song's classic intro. "My God, that's Bach," said Meinkewitz, not putting on the earmuffs. "What are you talking about, Ray?" asked Patch. "A variation on number 8, BWV 779 by Johann Sebastian Bach." "Oh, come on, Ray, don't patronize me," laughed Patch. "Who, me?" "I know what Morrison does next," said Patch. "Sullivan told them not to use the phrase, 'girl, we couldn't get much higher.' Are you telling me Morrison defies Ed Sullivan?" "As you are so fond of saying, Ray, listen up." Morrison did indeed sing the song as written, which stunned Meinkewitz. "Unbelievable!" "Come on, baby, light my fire," sang Patch along with the music. Then he laughed and kicked back to hear the song. Patch tapped both feet and moved his head. "I can't believe he took it to Ed," said Meinkewitz. "You make Ed Sullivan sound like a god, Ray. If you wanted your act on national TV, he is." The commercial break ended. Now Patch was stunned by Rodney Dangerfield's younger appearance. Dangerfield, hair darker and greased back, slightly pudgy yet odd-looking, rambled out from behind the curtain. Meinkewitz was already smiling. Patch laughed more at Meinkewitz cracking up than he did at Dangerfield's jokes. In the back seat of a 1967 Cadillac, Patch was mesmerized by the skyscraper-lighted windows of New York City, but he was more concerned at the 80 miles an hour this caddy was averaging up the highway. "Where are we headed?" asked Meinkewitz. "For now, the Brooklyn Bridge, gentlemen," said the southerner in the passenger seat. "I would ask you to move quickly once we get outside. Our security may have been compromised at the Sullivan show. Our members of the team will walk with you to the excursion vehicle." "Excursion to where?" asked Patch. "We don't have that information," said the burly driver with the handlebar mustache. "Baker Finch," said Patch in a lower voice. "I don't think that man'll stop, Ray." Meinkewitz nodded as they neared the massive bridge span with Manhattan's skyline blazing in the night. The Cadillac started up the incline. Patch replayed the Sullivan show in his mind. Morrison defying Sullivan made him smile, but Finch, almost snatching them from the theater, sent his adrenaline flowing. They passed 2 men in hooded sweatshirts and sweatpants. Then the driver pulled over to the curb several hundred feet ahead. "Those 2 men will catch up with you." "Gotcha," said Meinkewitz. "Anytime, Chief," said the guy in the passenger seat. He stepped out onto the curb and opened Meynkewitz's door. Then he pulled Meinkewitz up to the curb. Patch followed behind. "Break on through, boys." "I hope so," said Patch. The man climbed back in the caddy and the 2 men sped away. "Captain Kincaid, Dr. Meinkewitz," said the curly-haired kid shorter than Patch. "I am Colonel Mendez. This is Sergeant Carlins. Keep walking. We are part of U-Team Resolve." "Who sent you?" asked Patch. "Denali." "Well, what's this all about?" asked Meinkewitz. "We are heading to Vietnam," said Mendez. "What?" Finney, said Meinkewitz. "Yes, sir. We are part of a team that will get him out of prison, and we'll find Windcamp. You'll interrogate him." "What about Mike?" The colonel looked down with glazed eyes. "Mike is MIA, Patch. We don't know where he is." Patch closed his eyes. "This is not good." "How the hell do we get in and out?" asked Meinkewitz. "Let our team handle that." Meinkewitz leaned forward. "Is Finney all right?" "He's alive, but hardly all right. Tortured by our own forces." "Nothing surprises me anymore, Colonel. Nothing. With all we've been through, Ray, and now this with Mike. Bringing this guy into the Dallas force just to set up Oswald. Oh, we can't be sure of that, Patch. Just like the rest of this case, all convenient lies and omissions, and all the character destruction. People killed and now Mike missing. One huge production, courtesy of the Central Intelligence Agency.